I'm going to say right off the bat in this video that obviously I disagree with US President Donald Trump putting a 25% tariff on all Canadian products being imported into the United States. He has concerns about the border, our defense spending, and other things, but it's still not a fit response to the actual issue at hand. Now, moving on to Canadian politicians' response to this, let's at least stick with Canadian elected officials because it doesn't really matter what someone says if they're not actually in government. Canada's elected politicians are taking the dumbest possible approach in response to the tariffs. They are turning this into a trade war, and you could say maybe it was inevitable. Maybe Canada would have to respond in some way by tariffing certain US products, and I could agree to that. Tariff certain ones, let register our discontent. But the problem we have here in Canada is we are already overtaxed, overregulated, and we even have provincial trade barriers between our provinces. They might not work like literal barriers, but if you go into certain jurisdictions in Canada, you cannot sell certain products into another because there are certain red lines around where dairy can be produced and sold and where different other sort of farm products and other finished products are allowed to be sold without being taxed more. So, why would our response be more taxes? That is what we are doing by trying to do dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs. I know some of the premiers and Trudeau are doing it in stages, which is a little bit better, but at the same time, the problem is that it doesn't matter if Canadians are willing to fight a trade war. We can't fight a trade war because our politicians suck at their jobs and we're all broke. We do not have the bandwidth to fight with the Americans. We can have a bigger fighting spirit than they do, but it doesn't really matter when every single province with combined provincial and federal taxes like pays more in income taxes than even the highest taxed state in the US. It's absolutely insane that we thought that we're going to be able to get them to back down, intimidate them. But I want to go through some of the statements that different premiers and Justin Trudeau have made in the aftermath of Trump putting in place the 25% tariffs and why this is rhetorically, I guess, smart in the short run. But if we're thinking in the medium to long term in terms of Canada's economic health, this is very foolish, and they are doubling down on the reasons why Canada's economy is weaker than the US. Before I get into it, guys, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. What do you think about the trade war? Is the obvious question of the day. Here is Ontario Premier, who just got newly elected from his snap election, Doug Ford, talking about taking booze off the shelves, American booze off the shelves of LCBOs to get back at them.
Is off the shelves.
Ooh.
Is off the shelves. Also, starting today, all US-based companies will be banned from taking part in government procurement. Every year, the province and its agencies spend about $30 billion on procurement, alongside our more than $200 billion plan to build infrastructure. US-based businesses will now lose out on tens of billions of dollars in revenues. They only have President Trump to blame.
He's literally canceling Starlink, by the way, which you could say is trying to get at Elon Musk, who is one of Trump's advisors. At the same time, are you going to replace Starlink with the Canadian version of Starlink? That doesn't exist. So what Ford's doing here is kicking Northern Ontarians in the face and forcing them to have worse internet access because we think that ripping up a contract with Starlink, which really doesn't affect Elon Musk that much or Trump, is going to be the secret sauce to winning this trade war. It's foolish.
I'm also urging all 444 municipalities to do the same. And I'm thrilled to see some are already stepping up. For example, Mayor Patrick Brown in the city of Brampton and many other cities. As part of this government-wide procurement ban, we're going one step further. We're ripping up Ontario's contract with Starlink. It's done, it's gone. We won't award contracts to people who enable and encourage economic attacks on our province and our country.
It's foolish. Again, you can say, and you can have that gut instinct that we should fight back. We should put retaliatory tariffs on them. If they tariff us, we tariff them. Okay, a tariff on them is really us taxing our own people to import American goods. Yeah, you could say, well, we shouldn't be buying their goods if we're in a trade war. The problem is, if there's not a cheaper Canadian alternative, what's the point? We are simply paying more for our basic needs, and we wouldn't be importing it if we could get it here cheaper in the first place. We actually already have a lot of tariffs on American dairy, cheese, other farm output goods, certain raw materials. We tariff them quite a bit on certain products. So we already are kind of hypocritical. I was just checking out what Fox News was trying to say about this, and they were already saying, well, Canada already tariffs us on a bunch of our products, so they can't complain too much if we tariff them. And it's like, yeah, the blanket 25% tariffs are way bigger than what Canada has on them. Yeah, we have like 250% dairy tariffs, but that's just dairy. At the same time, it does undermine our ability to make an argument to Americans themselves that this is unfair when they can see, well, you guys were technically tariffing us before. And it's like, yeah, and that's technically true. And now we don't have a leg to stand on. Like, I don't want to highlight this because it's so stupid looking. All the liquor going off of Canadian shelves. I guess we're going to really hurt Kentucky by taking all their bourbon down. My goodness. Who actually cares? Is this like, I know maybe certain governors aren't going to like this, but this is not going to be what ends up causing the trade war to end. I think what would be more effective, not just in terms of sustaining the living standards of Canadians, but also ending the trade war faster, we cut our taxes. We reduce our regulations hardcore. So then we actually become the better jurisdiction to set up shop and do business in if there's tariffs or not. The problem, again, like I said at the start, is that we're overtaxed and regulated. That's why a lot of jobs are already going down to the US pre-tariff. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to circle the wagons, but we're circling the wagons around a patch of land where there isn't any real resources we can live off of. We have picked a very stupid ground to try and fight on. But anyways, I wanted to highlight this other comment that Doug Ford made before I move on to David Eby and Justin Trudeau. This was just patently ridiculous and demonstrating how this is all just an ego-stroking exercise for some people like Ford.
You know, to the president, I'm a different type of cat. I'll fight tooth and nail. I'm not going to roll over and get annihilated. I'll fight right to the death. Not that there's going to be any deaths, but, you know, the economy. I will go out. He has no idea. He has absolutely no idea.
Okay, well, I hope that you're willing to bankrupt like Ontarians before anyone in the US is going to feel nearly as much stress. That's the problem here. It's not me being unpatriotic pointing out that we can't win a trade war. It's just the facts. Should we try and secure the border better? Because I have not seen any of these politicians try and secure the border better. Is Trump's concerns kind of inflated, overblown? Probably. At the same time, we have an economy a tenth of the size of them, so maybe it's not the best move to start like trying to push the envelope and pretend like he's being ridiculous and we're going to fight back. Like, okay, well, you know, that guy has a machine gun and we have like a 22 pistol. This is not exactly like a fair fight here that we're trying to get involved with, rather than sometimes you just gotta do what the person wants a little bit, so that even if they try and tariff you anyways, we could have called his bluff. We could have shown to the American people that he wasn't serious. But now we don't even know if we actually did do something substantial to secure the border, if he wouldn't have tariffed us or not. It's ridiculous.
Canadians are reasonable and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. And now, to my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help.
He's talking about subsidies. He's talking about more welfare and subsidies. And yeah, well, some people lose their jobs and maybe we could give them targeted support. Sure. Cut their taxes. Find the industries that have the 25% tariffs and cut their corporate taxes in half. Do that. But the problem is, our federal budget, we are in a $62 billion deficit because of all the wasteful spending that the Trudeau government already engages with. So we can't really cut taxes without cutting wasteful spending. We should be doing both. If we have a competent government, we'd be getting rid of tons and tons of stupid fake job programs, and we would be using the room we've created in our budget in order to slash taxes everywhere. Our corporate taxes in Canada, I believe federal corporate taxes are like 18%, actually might be more like 28%. It's ridiculous how high corporate taxes are in this country. Our top level income taxes are crazy high. We should be slashing it all. I even read a Fraser Institute study the other day that in British Columbia specifically, if you reduce the top line tax bracket from 20.5% down to 14, the province would barely lose any revenue because you're taxing people at such a high volume that they just stop working after a while. And so if you reduce the taxes, your actual growth in the pie of the economy will more than make up for it in the long run. But we can't learn any lessons here in Canada, apparently, and we're just going to continue doing more socialism in response to troubles coming down the pike.
But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter
Well, my goodness, how long this lasts? Like, if it's going to last more than a couple months, dude, back off.
what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day.
This is why it's so hypocritical. This is why I'm highlighting Doug Ford, Justin Trudeau, and I'm about to talk about David Eby. These guys are the highest taxed, these guys are in charge of the highest tax jurisdictions in the country. And they're here to say, no, we have your back. Like, no, you haven't. You've literally not had our back at all. You've made life worse for people. And then you're here to take credit. You're here to tell us, no, don't worry. We're here to fight for you. Here is a great post from my friend Daniel Boardman about this whole thing. He says, Canada's plan to fight Trump. Raise everyone's taxes by $3,000. Give everyone $2,000. Give Mark Carney's companies the remaining $1,000. Print a bajillion dollars, insert empty slogan. And that's the problem. These people are doing the exact same thing they did for COVID, and they're expecting different results because they're insane or they're deeply dishonest. Okay, well, here's David Eby's response from, here's his response to the tariffs.
We didn't ask for this fight that the president has brought to Canada.
By the way, though, if there is a politician in Canada who asked for this fight, it was David Eby, because he is the man who is letting fentanyl and other drugs flow freely around his province, including handing out government-created drugs to addicts, flooding the streets with hydromorphone pills. It's nuts. He is the poster child that Trump needs to justify the tariffs because this guy does not care about border security and drug enforcement at all.
British Columbia. But I'll tell you this, we're not going to shrink from it. The president wants to hurt Canadians. If he wants to hurt British Columbians, then we have no choice but to respond in kind to the United States. Our response is pretty straightforward. It's a message to Americans about what this is going to cost them. Everything from the cost of pasta to the cost of a home or a car, or to turn on the lights, or to fill up a tank of gas, is going to go up in a way that is noticeable and significant for American families, for Americans who work in manufacturing.
By the way, think of how hypocritical this is. He's talking about how they should know how much, because the Trump administration is doing this, how much pasta is going to go up in price, how much gas, housing is going to go up in price, all your critical minerals. How can we not apply this to the stupid taxes and regulations that people like David Eby pass? Every time he passes something and people tell him, the price of everything's going to go up because of this. Well, don't you believe in climate change? Well, don't you believe in equity? Don't you believe in tolerance? Every time somebody calls these guys out for their big government policies that makes people's lives worse, then you're wrong. But if Trump makes Canadians' lives more expensive, then the government's going to call him out in the same way more conservative, economists, more conservative politicians call them out for being complete hacks. This is absolutely insane. I actually did appreciate the New Blue Party of Ontario calling out Ford and the PCs for all of the taxes that they've raised, for all the taxes they've refused to lower over the past decade or so, since 2018. That at the same time that they're attacking Trump because he's the one making people's lives expensive. Like, no, that was you guys, by the way. Anyways, I'll let David Eby finish this one up here before I want to move on to Jagmeet Singh now using this as a catalyst to avoid the next election.
The factories that you work in, the inputs that you use to make the things that are sold around the world have just become significantly less competitive. Your jobs will be taken by people living in countries other than the United States who have access to the raw materials that Canada provides without tariffs.
You know, we could actually manufacture those goods in Canada instead of the US, not from like a protectionist perspective that we should tariff people who make the products so that we have to build them here and like it's like some autarky like economy. I'm not in favor of autarky, but you can lower taxes enough that people will manufacture in your country. Ireland did it. Singapore did it. Other small jurisdictions have done it. Ireland's not exactly small. And you could say, well, we're not Singapore, we're Canada. Why not be Singapore with resources? Why not be Singapore with oil and gas and aluminum mines and coal mines? Why not? It sounds great to me. We could produce steel and then make things out of the steel if we lowered taxes enough and become the economic boom zone of the entire world. And then we don't have to import labor, cheap labor also, if taxes are super low and people can pay Canadians very high wages to do work, knowing that they can still be hyper profitable at the same time. Anyways, well, here is Jagmeet Singh now taking this as his best opportunity to say, oh, maybe we need to push off the next election for a while. There's already good evidence that Mark Carney was never going to call an early election because there was a by-election happening in Halifax in April. So why would they schedule a by-election for Halifax in April if the federal election was going to be called before April? And even then, you're not going to call a federal election literally right after a by-election wraps up. That seems fairly silly, and it might even hurt your brand in the province of Nova Scotia to have suddenly a by-election in Halifax. That guy gets elected, the whole province focuses on the by-election. Then a week later, that person has to then run for re-election because the party was obviously just using that riding as a litmus test for their overall national campaign.
You want to vote down the government at your earliest opportunity. Do you still stand by that statement? And do you think now is the time for an election?
Now is the time to put workers first. We need supports for workers first, put in place working, an election afterwards.
This tariff war could go on for 4 years. So how long would these measures that you're suggesting go on for? And how are we paying for it?
So the employment insurance should be permanent changes to the employment insurance that cover workers when they're impacted. And then the measures in terms of the economic stimulus, we need it immediately. We need a short-term fix. And as we move towards building a more resilient economy, we can look at ways to adjust it.
Do you see this legislation, or if it would require legislation, see it receive royal assent before you'd be comfortable going to an election? You need to see it become law or pass through the Senate and return back?
Yeah, I don't want just a lip service. I want protections in place for workers, passed and implemented, helping out people. We literally have a dire situation. 25% tariffs on our country will mean potentially hundreds and thousands of workers lose their jobs. So to Canadians listening, my commitment to you is I promise I'm going to fight to protect your jobs. I promise I'm going to fight to make sure workers impacted get help. And I promise that I'm going to put in place supports that I can do so that people who are worried about the cost of living that's already so high going up, I'm going to fight to make sure life is more affordable.
I just decided to let that entire clip play all the way through there. So yeah, there's not going to be an election. He dodged the question about, well, this could go on for a long time. If you're saying you don't want to have an election in the middle of it, couldn't you now make the case that you're not going to hold an election until you have to in October? And by the way, you can technically still push the election back by another year because our charter says elections every 5 years. And it was not until another basically piece of legislation that was passed, basically saying that the election should happen every 4 years. Maybe Carney and Jagmeet Singh and Blanchet were basically say that, well, it has to be 5 years because we're in the middle of an economic crisis. We can't have an election now. I doubt that would happen, but maybe it could happen. There's strong possibility to at least try and make the argument. But yeah, he doesn't want to do it. And what's Jagmeet Singh's solution to this problem that we're having right now? And he's going to have influence over the legislation that Carney's Liberals passed in response to all this. More socialism, just more protections, more taxes to try and defend industries in Canada that, by the way, don't even exist. We can't take the products that are being taxed from the US and then just start making them overnight in Canada. We might not have the factories. We might not have the actual infrastructure to provide those services and products ourselves in the short run, and yet we're going to put in place tariffs without even thinking. This is not just going to be something that's going to hurt certain select industries. This hurts everyone as soon as you put tariffs in place. If we didn't put tariffs, we could then try and support those specific industries that rely heavily on exports into the US, while also trying to make the economy more competitive through tax cuts and other measures. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. This is going to get messy. I'm going to try and cover it day to day. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that great stuff. I'm about to go check out a Mark Carney event that's happening in Calgary. I'm already wearing my liberal gray sweater, so hopefully they let me in. And if not, I guess I'm just going to have to go sit in the cold and cry about it or something. Anyways, see you guys all later.